that if Bush decided to, hey, you know what, I think I'll take you up on that great offer of 2003 to negotiate everything, do you think they'd go along with that, or they wouldn't at this point?
I don't know. I don't really know enough about what's going on inside Iran. You really have to talk to somebody like Juan Cole or a genuine expert in terms of how Iranian politics are playing out. I would think if the Iranians right now basically see themselves as in a very strong position, and that might disincline them to want to engage in serious negotiations. And also, from what I understand about Iran, obviously the government there has moved to the right as a result of the events of the past 5 years, and that it is more conservative now and maybe less interested in cutting a deal. But, you don't know until you try. I mean, quite honestly, the negotiations up till now have not gone anywhere because the United States has not been a serious player.
Well, the place in the region where they've been strengthened the most is in southern Iraq, and of course America has supported the Supreme Islamic Council and the Dawa Party above all others in that country to the benefit of Iran. But lately, Maliki of the Dawa Party, the Quisling prime minister, has said, okay, America, we don't need you anymore. You can go ahead and go. Do you think that he really means that, or that's just political cover for him at home? Is he really in a position where he only needs the backing of the Iranians and no longer of the Americans too?
Well, I think there are a couple ways to look at this. I think mostly what he's saying is for domestic politics. They have local elections coming up at the end of the year, and there was a strong indication that the Mahdi, the group around Muqtada al-Sadr, was going to stage a major victory. So he wanted to forestall that, and indeed, the Mahdi has been apparently losing some of its political support. So there's a domestic agenda there, and I think that to a certain extent he does feel that as the security situation improves, the United States becomes a more marginal player, and I think what he'll try to do is play the United States to get the support that he really feels he needs, and basically exclude the U.S. from any of the political process. How successful he'll be, who knows? And indeed, the security situation seems to have gone south again. Today there was a bombing that killed over 50 people, or a series of suicide bombings that killed over 50 people in Baghdad. So, that's kind of breaking up, too.
Yeah, 70 killed, 300 wounded. I only just hit refresh on antiwar.com. It's all red.
Yeah.
Everything's blown up all over the world, it looks like, Harry.
Well, so the security situation is maybe not as stable as it, to a certain extent, seems. A lot of the security situation depends on other political factors as to who's doing what to whom and how they think they're going to come out of a situation and whether they're lying low for the moment. There are a lot of things that make it very complicated.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have this whole Sunni awakening with the concerned local citizens, the Sons of Iraq, who are basically the Sunni insurgency who resisted the occupation for years, but then basically have decided to go on the dole. But do you have any indications, and I mean, I guess it's possible as far as I know, but do you have any indications that they are actually willing to join the Maliki government as a minority player, or that the Maliki government would be willing to have them?
Well, I think the answer to that has to be that what kind of incentives are offered to them. The big problem for the Sunnis, of course, is money. They don't have access to the oil revenue, and the Maliki government has been very resistant on implementing any kind of, shall we say, constitutional changes that would share revenue and that sort of thing. Yeah, I guess if you gave the Sunnis enough of an incentive, they might be interested in participating in the government. But I don't know how far you can go with that one. I mean, it's just basically they have a local interest that's distinct from that of the central government, like the Kurds. The Kurds are, I'm sure you've been reading, are expanding their zone of authority up in the north of Iraq. I mean, everybody has all kinds of horses in this race, and to look at it in simplistic terms, like Democrats and Republicans, we have a political system, and authority is passed from one party to the other. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
So, in other words, what you're trying to say is the surge worked.
I don't know. The surge or the enhancement or whatever the technical term was for it certainly has created better security in some areas, But there are a lot of people like Juan Cole who are saying that, security in a lot of other areas has gotten worse, and that there are political explanations for why some areas are more stable at the moment that are probably not permanent.
Now, let's see. I got so many different things here I wanted to ask you about. I got to try to keep them in order here. Well, first of all, what years were you in the CIA?
I was in from 75 through 92.
Oh, okay.
And then for a year again around about 9/11.
Oh, wow. Okay, so then you do know the answer to this question, I think. There's an article today on the front of Antiwar.com. Iran's Islamic Revolution had Western blessing. And I don't know if you read this thing. It's an interview that says that basically the Americans gave a wink and a nod to the Ayatollah Khomeini and said, well, look, this is basically inevitable. The Shah was dying or whatever. They got him out of the country. Go ahead and recognized the government, and everything was fine until the revolution kind of got out of control and they seized the hostages at the embassy, and it was downhill from there. Is that right?
Yeah, that's basically true. There were a number of divergent views on what was going on in Iran at that time. The intelligence services, which, of course, where I was, basically were saying that the Shah would be able to stabilize the situation, and he still should be the horse that would be backed. However, there were strong divergences within the Carter White House, within the National Security Council there, and also at the State Department. So there were people saying all kinds of different things, and there was no lack of people who were supportive of Khomeini and what Khomeini represented before Khomeini began to demonstrate traits that Washington found very much undesirable.
Well, and there's all kinds of scandals. I remember Robert Perry, the great investigative reporter, told me that when he investigated Iran-Contra, he noticed that as he peeled the layers of the onion, it just kept going further and further back. And, of course, there's the stories, I don't know how exactly confirmed they are, that the Republicans made a deal with the Iranian revolutionaries to go ahead and keep the hostages longer in order to benefit the Republicans back then. Do you know about that?
Well, that story's been out there for quite a while, but I don't know if it's true. I never saw any actual evidence, but of course at that time I was in Rome, Italy, so I would not have necessarily been in the loop in terms of that, what was going on there.
I see. But does that seem plausible to you, or are you kind of suspicious of that, or I don't know, does that matter?
I'm kind of suspicious of that. I deep down I feel that most conspiracies tend to come out with time, and the fact that there really hasn't been any corroboration of that story would suggest to me that it's just a story.
Yeah. And, well, we'll have to look further into that one, I guess. All right. So now I want to ask you about your last article that you wrote for Antiwar.com, Conservative Confusion on Iran. And you're a member of the American Conservative Defense Alliance. You write for the American Conservative magazine, and you're not some hippy-dippy liberal peacenik. You're an America First kind of guy. And that's got to, at some level in there, got to conflict with be loyal to your country, be loyal to your president, go along and respect authority, and all those other conservative traits that most American conservatives apparently are overwhelmed by. How do you address them?
Well, basically, I go back to basics. I say that, conservatives, basically, their first loyalty should be to the Constitution, not to the president, not to a political party, and that the Constitution is everything. And we've seen our Constitution weakened by what's been going on over the last 5 or 6 years. And also the basic constitutional principle that you don't go to war without declaring war and with full consent of Congress has been trampled on. So that's a basic conservative principle. And I would point out to conservatives essentially that, the world is turned upside down in that if you're supporting George Bush, you're supporting big government, you're supporting budget deficits, you're supporting a stripping of constitutional rights, you're creating an environment in which the United States is going to war without having any vital interest at stake. It used to be conservatives stood for the opposite on all these things. And so what I'm saying is conservatives should go back to their conservative roots.
Yeah, I don't know. Makes perfect sense to me. I'm trying to play devil's advocate or something, but I can't think of the argument that goes against that. Just be loyal to your president, but that's just such a simple slogan. It doesn't really mean anything.
That's right.
And it doesn't make any sense when your president's wrong about everything.
That's the point. Yeah, the president is just an executive. The president is not the Constitution of the United States, and he's not the guarantor, or he's supposed to be the guarantor of our of our liberties and rights. But of course, when he's not doing that, he has to be held accountable.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, there's a new article in Salon.com by Tim Shorrock exposing Bush's historic abuse of power about the possibility of some new, real in-depth church committee type hearings